I got my big old teacher voice on. I'm channeling my inner cheerleader, which is what I tell my DRE students to do when they're sharing in the classroom. So hopefully in here you can hear me just fine. We're really glad that you're with us this afternoon. So we have facilitated and gathered this lovely panel of women representing leadership roles in our local community. The goal of this panel is for these women to share how they balance or attempt to balance, because I know from experience it is difficult, if not nigh impossible, to balance your professional life and your home life or your personal life. We're going to hear how they do it. We're going to hear about the obstacles that these women have faced and how they overcame them in their roles to achieve success in their chosen career fields. And we have a wide representation of career fields here. Miss Simon will introduce our panelists in just a moment, and they'll also share a little bit about themselves as part of their discussion today. This panel was created in coordination with Nash Reads, which is Nash Community College's Common Reading Program. This year, we have chosen the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. And in the title or chapter, she asked, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And I believe that this is a question that these women have asked themselves in some form, and that they answered and took charge of their life and did some amazing things. And we're going to hear from them momentarily. Each woman will share about 10 minutes. We'll have a time for a question and answer at the end. And if you have a question for a particular panelist, if you'll write it down, that way you won't forget it when the time comes to ask those questions. We're really glad that you're here, and we're going to get started.
Thank you, Ms. Harkins. So we have 4 wonderful panelists, and it is due to the warmth of their personalities that it is so warm in this particular room. Just wanted to remind everybody that we do have refreshments, and if you feel a little bit on the lightheaded side, do feel free to step on out if you need to. But otherwise, thank you, welcome all of you. So we have wonderful panelists. We're going to start from this end and kind of work our way on down. So first of all, we have Garret Shearin from The Painted Teacher. I love that name. Second, we have Monica Jordan, who is a pharmacist from the Southern Pharmacy Services, and then 2 wonderful, amazing department chairs, Amy Harrell and then Lisa Cooper. Each of them have been given will be given about 10 minutes to talk about, again, as Ms. Harkins mentioned, some of the obstacles and successes for their career path. What are the support systems that they have had along the way, and then what advice will they be able to give to our students, specifically as they go forth, starting their careers here at Nash and moving onwards. So we're going to start on the right-hand side and move on down. I'm going to ask you to speak into the microphone again for our virtual audience. Garret, I'll have you go ahead and start. As one quick note, I'll be your timekeeper, so I'll be on the side, and if you see me kind of waving like this, we're nearing the 10-minute mark.
Good afternoon. I will start by saying that owning a business is the most rewarding thing that I have done to date, but it is probably the most stressful if I'm honest. I went to college and pursued my lifelong dream of becoming a teacher, and I am currently a kindergarten teacher at Nashville Elementary School. But I also knew that I wanted more, and I had other passions in life. So I decided that I would pursue my dream of opening a women's boutique. So it took a lot of prayer, thought, commitment, and I began on that journey. I first began by painting door hangers. A little hobby, you know, the life back home was much different than college life. So I decided that I would come up with a hobby, and it just happened to be painting door hangers. So that turned into a little side business, and I later decided that I wanted to do a little bit more with that. So I was going to craft shows, and I decided, well, I'll add in some jewelry, and I did that. And then I later added on clothes, and that brings me to where I am today, which is the Painted Teacher Boutique in downtown Nashville. So, you know, life is like one big trip, and we make lots of pit stops along the way. And all of those things led me to the point I am now. So I just know that in reading this book, she often referred to the workforce as having glass ceilings for women, and she expressed her thoughts on how motherhood, how it was so beautiful, but yet it could be a hindrance for many women trying to move up the ladder. And why was that? So I think truly it's because that's how history has played out. But we don't have to accept that theory. We can work hard and we can be the change. So, even though I was already in a full-time career, I knew that I had a passion for something more. So I didn't let that stop me. Always pursue whatever your dreams are. I had a lot of things and challenges along the way that were hard, and it was hard. It would have been much easier just to give up, but I decided to push through because that's what we need to do. So in the book, Sandberg also said that women keep themselves from advancing because of the lack of self-confidence and drive that men have. She stated that we lower our own expectations that we can achieve. And I just think that was so crazy, how we lower our own personal expectations. We let our minds play games and tell us that we can't measure up. But I'm here to tell you that don't let anybody damper your spirit or your dreams. You can achieve anything that you set your mind to. It may take years or months, but it is possible. You just have to be mindful who you share those dreams with and find somebody that is encouraging and supportive along the way. In the book, she also talked about how, it was a successful man was thought to be a great boss, but if a woman was successful, people often thought she would be hard to work for. And I think we need to change that mindset because we can all be successful no matter our gender, race, background. And I'm just here to show you that you can work a full-time job and also pursue a dream. You don't have to let something stop you. I started making little door hangers that didn't cost me hardly anything. But you save up and you work towards what you want. So, of course, you're going to mess up along the way. That's part of life. But we must endeavor to push through, find a balance of personal life, work life. And I will be honest that is hard for me. Time management is not my top skill. A lot of times I will get sucked in on my phone when I'm supposed to be ordering merchandise for the store, and I'll be scrolling through Facebook, and my husband's like, what are you doing? Wasting time. So I think if you want something, you got to set a plan, and the best thing to do is get an agenda, write things down. There's always going to be challenges and conflicts with other commitments, but you just have to push through. So I encourage you to, if you have a dream or a goal, write it down. Don't put it aside totally. You could even make a dream board. I know some people do that. I personally did not, but you could. And I think that you really need to lean on friends or family that you can trust on to help encourage you pursue those dreams. And I will say that my faith has really gotten me through. I am a believer, so I turn to God. And a lot of times things get tough, but you got to pray about it and stick it out. So I definitely think that her book, it has how, women in the working field, a lot of times we feel like we can't amount to much because of what history has said and how men are usually in charge. But I'm here to tell you that you can do anything that you choose to do. You just have to find the right amount of balance in your life and just push through. I will say that everything is a learning experience. I've had setbacks along the way. When I first started, of course, I said I was in craft shows and doing, and then I started in a little store, and that did not work out well. So I ended up taking a jump and a leap of faith, and I went into my own store. And of course, there are months and times where I'm like, why in the world am I doing this? But you can do anything you set your mind to. So again, no matter if you are, just starting college, you're financially not stable, you just got to set a goal and a dream and work for it. And she often shares some insight in the book, if you've read it, about how you can push through and we need to forget the stereotypes and definitely go for our goals and our dreams.
Good afternoon, everybody. So let me just start by saying I'm not sure that my story is as interesting as hers. I'm only 31 years old, so I still have a lot of living and a lot of learning to do. But I will start by telling you guys a little story about, you know, how my dad actually instilled in me some values and some lessons even when I was in kindergarten. He told me about how he was part of the first wave of integration in our town. So he was one of the first black students to go into a previously all-white elementary school. I think he told me he was about 7 or 8 when that happened. And he told me he was just so petrified of his teacher that he found himself, you know, not answering questions and not doing the homework and not participating in class because he was that scared. He didn't know, he hadn't experienced it before. So he said he found himself dimming his light so that he wouldn't shine too bright because he didn't want that attention. He didn't know what that attention would result in. So from there, he told me, never let your light dim in order to let somebody else's shine a little brighter. And he always told me, you know, people look at you and they'll automatically assume because of the color of your skin that you can't do something or that you're not as worthy of something, but you are. And he told me you might have to work 10 times as hard to be just as good as somebody else. But if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. So from there, with him telling me all of that, and he told me that at the beginning of every single school year, I will never forget it. From there, you know, that kind of instilled in me that I'm going to have to work hard. And I might have to work a little bit harder. So I decided, I saw on TV one day this woman, and she was a pharmacist, and she was standing behind the counter. And I remember thinking that she was playing with candy on this little sliding board. I was like, and I'm only like 10 at the time. I'm like, geez, it must be kind of cool to play with candy all day. I wonder what a pharmacist does. So from there I started, you know, kind of figuring out, and every time my mom would go to like Rite Aid, I think at the time it was Eckerd. I hope I'm not telling how old I am. But at the time it was Eckerd's, and we would go in and I would just see the pharmacist. Every time we would go in, and I just became so intrigued. So by the time I got to high school, I actually asked for an opportunity to shadow a pharmacist and figured out that's what I wanted to do. So long story made short, I went through 4 years of undergrad at North Carolina Central and went to 4 years of pharmacy school at Campbell University and graduated in 2013. And I've been practicing pharmacy ever since. I started out as a pharmacy manager with Walgreens, and that presented its own set of struggles in its own, because I was 29 years old. I was the only black female pharmacist in the entire district. So if somebody said they visited a black pharmacist, it was me. Like, no matter whether it was a positive experience or a negative one, they were talking about me. I was the only one. And I remember the store that they put me in, I had never practiced before. The store they put me in was a 24-hour store right across the street from a hospital. I had never practiced before, ever. It was my first night by myself, and I had the rush hour. So I was petrified, and I just remember my dad saying, you will never be scared of anything else. You will never let your light dim in order to let somebody else's shine brighter. So do what you can do your best, and God will do the rest. So it was a rough shift, but I got through it. And each day, you know, I felt like I learned something about myself that made me grow a little bit stronger and let me learn from my previous mistakes and my previous experiences. Then I left from, I found myself getting a little bit too comfortable in retail. And when I say retail, I refer to like the Rite Aids and the Walgreens and Walmart pharmacies. So I decided to transition into a different area of pharmacy, and that led me to go into hospital. Well, in hospital pharmacy, it was a lot different. It was nothing that I ever realized or experienced before. New drugs, new procedures, new patient cases, new workload, different work systems. So I had to find myself learning on the go and standing stronger. And again, never let your light shine, or never let your light dim in order to let somebody else's shine brighter. I had coworkers who thought, one, that I was too young, two, here we are again, I'm the only black female in the entire hospital, and they stuck me on third shift where I was the only pharmacist in the entire hospital by myself. So I had to learn, again, how to be reliant on myself and how to just make sure, even if I didn't feel confident, that I spoke with confidence and I faked it until I made it. I never really felt confident, but you would never tell unless you actually asked me. And, you know, once I got the hang of the hospital, I decided, well, I'm getting comfortable here too. I never like to be comfortable. So I decided, well, why don't I transition into another area? And that leads me to where I am now. I'm a long-term care pharmacist now, where I dispense medications to prisons and rest homes and foster homes. So I get to see a whole new set of patient loads and patient cases and different work systems. So all the while during my career, I found myself trying to learn different things and grow and grasp from every single experience. And I think that's what contributes to my success. I'd also like to say, I have a little amen corner. I have a little amen corner, and that kind of brings me to the next point. You know, while I was an undergrad, I had a teacher tell me, you know, if you are too successful, you may have to give up some of your family aspirations, and some of your aspirations have a family, and, you know, be married, because that can be intimidating. Man, my way that wasn't intimidated by the fact that I always wanted to do professionally the best that I could. And life kind of happened fast, so we had 3 children. So now I'm balancing a full-time work schedule as well as 3 children who are all under 3 years old. So time management is definitely not one of my strong suits, but I'm working on it. And I think, you know, God sending 3 kids my way kind of shows me that I'm a lot stronger than I thought I was previously, because they come with their own set of challenges. So in order to make me be the best me that I can be, he throws challenges my way, and I have to learn from them. It might not be, you know, exactly the glorious, you know, story that she may have had, or the glorious story that someone else might have had, but it's something that molds me and shapes me into who I am. And I'm very appreciative of all of the struggles and the challenges that I've had over the last 5 years, trying to get to just this point in itself. So that's a little bit about me.
Does it matter? Okay, my name's Amy Harrell. Ms. Cooper and I have the same job in different departments here at the college, but we came at it in very different directions. And I am, I guess you could say here in many ways, kind of by accident. It's not, I never had the grand leadership plan, you know, I want to be a leader at a community college. My master's degree is in criminal justice. My experience before I came to the college was as a juvenile probation officer. That was a job that I loved dearly. I came here as the prison education coordinator, but shortly after I came here, I realized I had no background in education, and I wanted a background in education. And I was planning to pursue a master's degree, and it was actually our president, Dr. Carver, who said, if you're going to get another degree, you might as well just get a doctorate. Okay. And so I was 6 months pregnant and enrolled in a doctoral program, and that's a whole nother story we could talk about. So this wasn't necessarily my goal, my vision. I didn't necessarily even have one. I wasn't that long term, I want to be here and I want to be there. Not that that's bad. It's just not where I was. The irony is my mother is retired from a community college, and she would say, oh, you have a master's degree and you can teach at the community college, and then you could get your doctorate and you could advance. And no, I have a degree in criminal justice, and that's what I'm going to do. Sometimes your mother's wisdom, you know, kind of works out. But it was interesting. There were so many things in the Lean In book, and I was part of the committee that selected it. And as I read through it, and I would tell my coworkers, you know, I have a story that goes with almost every chapter. And when she talks about the self-confidence and feelings of insecurity, and I don't know, and certainly that's not only for women. Certainly men can feel a lack of confidence. But I think as women, we often equate confidence with arrogance. And then maybe part of that is why we display less confidence. But that is certainly me. I have had a lifetime struggle with different degrees of anxiety and depression. And so certainly self-confidence and fear are magnified there. And so I can remember I still remember it clearly, even though it was years ago, when the vice president at the time called me and said, you know, I want to meet with you tomorrow. And she named some other reason that she wanted to meet with me. And I said, okay, that's fine. And my boss, and she was female, my boss was male, and he came in later and said, did you talk to Helen? Yeah. I'm meeting with Helen tomorrow. That's not what she wants to talk to you about. so-and-so is retiring, and we want you to be the department chair. And I went home and spent the whole night with the reasons of why I was not the right person for the job. Not that I didn't want it, not that I wasn't interested in it, but I am not qualified for that. I might be qualified to lead this other department. I am not qualified. It was a department different from academic credentials. I am not qualified for that. But I will always be grateful to Helen Pazak, because when I went in her office the next day, soon as I walked in, she said, I do not want to hear your reasons why you do not want the job or why you do not think you were qualified for it. I want to talk about who's going to replace you at the job you have now. And that is actually the conversation that we had. And now by the time it was over, she said, you really do have a choice. I hope you'll say yes. Think about it over the weekend. I will always be grateful for that, because I would not have had the self-confidence to even accept it, even when it was being offered to me. It was funny, in one of the chapters, she talks about negotiations for salary. And I thought of the story, and it's okay if you laugh, because it's the stupidest story. Negotiating a salary was something no one had ever discussed with me, had never thought about, never even crossed my mind. And I had a job, and then I was getting married. My husband and I lived 3 hours away. Well, I mean, we weren't married at the time. At the time, we were dating. We lived 3 hours apart. So I needed a job. And so I had applied for a job locally, close to where he was. And when they called me back and they offered me the job, and, you know, they post a range, and I had given my current salary, so I think they're going to offer me my current salary. And the salary was less. And it wasn't significantly less, but it was less. And I remember saying on the phone to the lady, okay, well, I hadn't really expected to take a pay cut. And she said, well, this is what we had intended to hire the job at. You know, I can go back to the director and ask. And in that split second, I said, no, that's okay. And in hindsight, you're like, how stupid is that? Like, I mean, at least say go back and ask, you know. But in that split second, I'm like a year out of my master's program. I'm getting married in 3 months. I need a job. What goes through my mind is they're going to say, oh, well, if you don't want this salary, we will just hire someone else. And so, but, you know, the 20 years experience now says the worst thing that would have happened was she would have come back and said, no, I'm sorry, we can't match you. And I would have said, okay. I needed a job. You know, I didn't even kind of think that through. So, you know, thinking through those, being assertive and standing up for yourself, which is not always natural to women. Maybe it's not always natural to men as well. I agree, you know, think about, don't let society define what your normal is. I will tell you without hesitation that my preference would have been to be a stay-at-home mother. Financially, that just wasn't, you know, our life situation. But that carries baggage with it then of, well, I'm not as, so-and-so is this friend of mine is a stay-at-home mother, and look how wonderful, and I have wonderful children. I don't mind saying that. The fact they were in daycare didn't harm them. They were probably better off in daycare than they would have been with me. I've often said they learned things, like they learned to dress themselves faster than I would have taught them, because it was just easier for me to dress them. But in the daycare where they've got 4 or 5 other kids, no, you got to put your own coat on, and you have to learn that pretty quickly. But make decisions that are best for your family, and not everybody else's family, and don't worry about what other people's ideal is. Accept that there are things that you have to let go, and be happy with that. I released the clean house years ago. My children are 11 and 15, and so it's in. Like I said, I was in a doctoral program when my oldest child was born. It is very easy to say I released the clean house 15 years ago, and I'm really not kidding you when I say that. My hairdresser one time said, "I said I haven't mopped in 6 months," and she was like, "Oh, I know better than that." You believe whatever you want to believe. I haven't mopped in 6 months. I mean, you know, mopping is overrated, because somebody is going to spill something on the floor as soon as you do. So what was the purpose in doing it to start with? And I know what she's released. I'll see if she tells you that or not. We thought that was, oh, maybe she won't. She's released Christmas cards. You know, she's released Christmas cards.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah. You know. But, you know, there are things, maybe I haven't volunteered as much as another parent, but that's okay. I've been to the major stuff. I've been on the field trips. I've been to the parent-teacher meetings. I've been to the parties. Maybe you don't even make all of those. It doesn't mean your kids are going to be axe murderers. I think a lot of times you know, other people's stuff, you know, we just, if I can't do what Paula does for her kids, then I am, you know, obviously less of a mother. But one of the chapters that also is critical, and that's the make your partner a real partner. And so the one thing I would say to both genders, but maybe more to the men in the room, I think Sandberg made the quote that there was a survey that said 9%, not 90, 9, of dual earner households share housework, childcare, and breadwinning evenly.
In 2009,
Yeah, in 2009. You know, that's sad. And I am married to a wonderful man who helps around the house, but I don't know that the equal's not there. And I don't mow the grass. Let me say that in his defense. You know, I don't mow the grass either, and I don't, you know, trim weeds or, you know, whatever. That's like once a week. The laundry needs to be done pretty regularly. The dishes need to be done every night. And so I still remember the day when my youngest son was an infant, and we were getting ready for work. Yes, I worked full-time. I was in school full-time, and I had an infant. And I just looked at him one morning and said, today you're making up the bed. Making up the bed takes like, 90 seconds if you're slow? I don't have 90 seconds. I'm breastfeeding a baby. I'm packing bags. I'm a bottle. I'm breakfast, you know, whatever. I don't have time to make the bed. The bed is your responsibility from now on. Okay. I mean, but it was just like I had always made the bed, so making the bed didn't cross his mind. He still makes the beds 15 years later, you know, but there were lots of those conversations that we didn't have along the way that we should have. When we know we're expecting a baby and we know that I'm in school, have that conversation in advance. So that would be a piece of advice. If you don't have children and then you're expecting children, have that conversation. And Sandberg talks about that. Like, we hadn't even talked about who's going to pick up the baby if it's sick. You know, have that conversation about. We eventually fell into a routine when he was a year old of whoever put the baby to bed, the other person does the dishes. And it was kind of an every other night. Putting the baby to bed was not always easy in our house, and that's, you know, a whole nother conversation. But the myth that you can do it all, there's a lot you can do, and there's a lot you don't necessarily have to. So look at what works for your family. Don't always compare yourself to somebody else. But definitely don't sell yourself short. And I think we do that a lot. Many of us do that a lot. Oh, I could never. And those of us in the room who are faculty, who are advisors, how many conversations we've had with students of, oh, I can never do that. Absolutely, you can do that. And so don't let other people sell your dream short. As well, whether you're male or female. We all let society define ourselves sometimes. Define yourself and be successful at that, as they said. You can be successful at most anything that you want to do.
Thank you. So I was very fortunate in that I got to be a mom. I got to be a stay-at-home mom, and thought that was... Well, actually, now my husband blames me for everything that's happened to the children since. But at the time, I thought that was just pretty darn okay. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I didn't want to be a teacher. Oh, oops. And so I had gotten my master's degree in communications, and I loved drama and theater, but I wasn't sure how that translated into what I was supposed to do. And then... So I was able to teach a little on the side, and an opportunity to come work here full-time presented itself. And I think, okay, and I'm figuring out how kids are going to get to school, because now we're at kindergarten age, and how this is all going to happen. And there was this moment, so I'm just thinking of this partnership part, where I came back and said this opportunity, and I was applying and talking to my husband, and there was this moment, and he's never been there since, where he was kind of like, well... What are you going to do? I mean, how are we going to go forward? And, oh, I hope it works out for you. And I was like, this is a partnership. Now, it wasn't that bad. It's going out on YouTube, and I'll be in big trouble. But there was this moment where I said, this is our decision. It's not just me making this decision to do this. We can make this work, but it's our decision. You don't get to say later, I told you so. Anyway. Now, roles are reversed. My husband met some things called changing economies and things in the banking industry, but he decided to hang a shingle. And he works now at home, and I'm the primary, at least insurance provider, breadwinner, and he now is doing the dishes and all those things. So it's funny when you talk about that, Dr. Harrell, because I'm the one that has trouble. I mean, he is truthful. I haven't made dinner in I don't know how long, yet I think I still am responsible for it. I'm everything that happens to work, yet I still have. So some of it, I guess, is what I'm saying is those support mechanisms, but it's also ourselves saying, let it go. It's okay. You know, focus, what's important. So anyway, now I'm at my own crossroads of life and have gone back to school and am pursuing my doctorate. And that was a long conversation. Can you handle that? And I have no idea if I can handle that. I don't think I'm handling it. But I'm doing it. And one of those primary motivators I realized is that I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to do more. And I wanted to serve more. But I really know that meant I wanted to lead more. And I wanted those leadership opportunities. But with that, I realized I suffer from something else. And actually, it happened to Amy, so it would have reinforced this belief, and I still think it's a myth, and that's when Sheryl Sandberg talks about the tiara complex. I was good at school because you gave me the list of things I needed to do, and I could get my star on my potty chart because I understood that. I somehow foolishly still always expect that good work will reward itself in terms of if you have ambition for advancement. And that does not happen. Maybe it happens, but I still think overall you will see as you follow things, as you do social comparison, why you, not me, why me and not you, that you can't really necessarily trace a perfect line of, well, they did this, 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 and this, and this, and that's of course why they got recognized. And so that idea of advocating for yourself is very important. So that's a piece of advice. And I will say this from that female point of view, another thing that resonated with me, if you guys read it, was that research they did with the Howard and Heidi. It was exactly the same job description, same description of personality. All they did is change the name, and the perception of the people were different. I wouldn't want to work for that Heidi. She's bossy. And I'm bossy. So it's those perceptions. So we hold ourselves back, or as women, we might be more quiet, more demure because we don't want to be perceived, because I care very much about relationships. I don't want to be perceived in a negative light. So I'll talk less and sit back and not lean in. And so those are some of the key lessons that I guess stood out to me, is that there isn't going to someone just hand me the golden next thing, and I'll do what I can to advocate, and I'm going to do what I can to prepare myself. But I like this, so I'm going to pick on you guys in the audience for a minute. One of the things that really stood out to me is the idea that you sit at the table, and I have my back row friends right now. You look at my front rows open, and we always joke about that in class, because why? Because somehow you stand out when you sit in the front, and the teacher's going to call on you, and you're in big trouble, and that's not necessarily the case, because we're well aware of where everyone's sitting. But that stood out to me, that idea that you sit at the table, that you raise your hand even if the speaker is over. You don't always follow the rules, right? You advocate and you talk and those types of things. So that's really stood out to me. Although that really wasn't always my problem. I could sit at the table, but I always still felt like, do I speak now or forever hold my peace? So I feel like I'm at a crossroads because I want to speak my piece a little bit more. And I want to do, and that is horrible. Let me just tell you, wanting something is rough. I just should be happy with what I've got. But I'm not. I want more. I want to do more. And I hope that it comes from a place of actual humility and wanting to help others, because I've just had that pressed on my heart. But that's when you're not, when you want something, that satisfaction isn't, it's not complacent. I don't I'm tempted not to turn that brain off when I cross the threshold of work, because I care. Now, I'm really not telling you not to care. Please care. Because that's, I think, the first ingredient for whatever. Because if you care and you have passion, you put up with, you take, and you can have the courage, and you find the confidence in what you need to do. Because there's just something, there's just that itch that hasn't been scratched. So I don't know if I've kind of given you my like overarching grand scheme here, but those are just some of the things that stood out to me with the book. Oh, actually, one other thing I want to mention with the book that's just kind of related and talking about perceptions and women holding themselves back. But I think perceptions are so very important, and I do think that there is still disparity with higher levels of leadership. Women have made lots of progress, but even when you were first only different, so you were the one there, right? There wasn't relative to reality. There's a lot more African American women that are out there in the world for you to be the only one there. So your point of view and perspective isn't necessarily represented. It's not that necessarily anyone else that was working where you were didn't think about those things. They just didn't have that perspective or perception there. And that just really stood out to me, is that our biases, if we have them, are often because we haven't had an experience to think otherwise until those points of view are represented. And so that's just something that stood out to me.
Okay. How about we start with a round of applause for our panelists. And now we're going to transition into an equally valuable moment, which is going to be response from the audience, questions and answers. What am I doing? I teach English. So while there are technical difficulties caused by me, I'm going to start with a question for the panelists and then open up to anyone over here for what might be burning on your soul, maybe something that you wrote down during the panelists while they were speaking, or something that just kind of came to you in a moment. So I'm going to have each of you kind of speak briefly. The idea of mentorship was something that really resonated with me when reading the book, especially the day after Election Day, when we have so many more women in positions, political office, than we have ever had before. And a lot of that was due to mentorships and so kind of support systems that got them into the positions they are now. So I wanted to just kind of ask you briefly about what you find as the significance of mentorship on your career path. So I'm going to have you start with this.
As far as mentorship for my personal business, I honestly did not have a mentor. I just pursued a dream and went for it. I do think that it would be smart to find someone that has already traveled that same path and get some insight from them. So I would definitely encourage that. Then you wouldn't have so many firsts along the way. But for my other career, as for being a teacher, of course, we do have mentors our first few years, and I was always assigned one, and I definitely am a strong advocate for that. I believe that mentors have so much insight, and you don't always have to agree with what they tell you or share with you, but they are there for your best interest, and I do think that they are a great asset.
As far as a mentor, I wouldn't say I was necessarily assigned one, so much more than I kind of sought one out. When I first started at North Carolina Central, I remember sitting in like a freshman assembly class, and they told us, if you want to be noticed, you sit on the front row and you go and introduce yourself to everybody, and you say what you want to do and what your future plans are. So I found myself telling my future plans to the janitor, to the cafeteria lady, like everybody. So by the time I was finished, everybody on campus, you might not know my name, but you knew I wanted to be a pharmacist. So I kind of found a mentor that way, and it just so happened, while I'm telling my story to the janitor, another lady's walking past, and she's from my same hometown. She's a pharmacist, she's a black female, and she follows the exact same career path that I did. So I found myself talking to her a lot and asking her questions and drawing from her experiences so that, when I did face them on my own, it wasn't like she said, it wasn't a complete first, and I wasn't hit over the head or blindsided by anything. I kind of knew what to expect. And I guess more so than anything, she taught me that networking was invaluable, because a lot of times in competitive career fields, it's not what you know, but it's who you know. And I will say, without the networking skills that I developed along the way, I probably wouldn't have been able to have some of the job experiences I did. And like she said before, it's kind of being an advocate for yourself, because you may not think that I can do it. I might even think that I can do it, but I'm gonna convince you that I can. So it took a lot of that to kind of get to where I was, and it wouldn't have happened without her. So if she's watching, I'm forever grateful for what she did for me.
When I was in my master's program, so for my first career, I can name you one very easily. When I was in my master's program, I worked an assistantship at the University of South Carolina Department of I was at the University of South Carolina. I worked a graduate assistantship with the Department of Juvenile Justice, and my supervisor was very passionate about the field of juvenile justice. And I got a master's degree because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and so I just figured I'd delay it, for a little while longer. And so I was in this master's in criminal justice, but not without a lot of solid direction. But Charlotte Camper is her name, and her passion for juvenile justice was definitely what I caught, and that was a career that I loved with all my heart. And so when I came here, though, there's kind of been a series of people. I would say Helen Pazak that I spoke of earlier, was definitely someone that I respected tremendously, who taught me a lot, who put me in positions even when I hadn't necessarily asked to be there. But one of the things that Sandberg also speaks to is that, mentor is not always this like I am the superior person and you're the inferior person. My colleagues, Lisa Cooper, I love just as much as anybody in the world. And many of my colleagues, many of the other department chairs are people that they're my peers, but we learn from each other and we have similar experiences and we share, well, what did you do when you had this situation? Or I never thought about that. And so we've had kind of a collaborative mentorship, I guess. And so to me, that's always, your peers are not necessarily shouldn't be your enemies. They're not necessarily competitors either. The degree to which you can, even people in the same job role, can help one another, that's always your best case scenario, I think.
So that's what I was going to say. I'm sitting next to mine. It's true. I do too. You need a sounding board. You need somewhere to go. But I'm going to say I don't necessarily have that one, other than since my time at Nash, throughout my life, have really had someone, a mentor that guided me. My first job, I was catching fly balls and shag balls. I mean, it was crazy. Didn't feel like I knew what I was doing. And so one of the things that was very interesting that in the book, when she talked about mentors, and that book, Are You My Mother? And it's, are you my mentor? Will you be my mentor? I need a mentor. A mentor is apparently a very important thing that I need, and I must have one. And that's not exactly how you find a mentor, right? But find someone that you aspire to be, you have a connection. There's something you value about that individual. I want what she's having. There's something there that you can connect with, and then have the audacity to reach out and talk to them. And so that would be my encouragement for finding a mentor, and so that you aren't doing the walk alone. And so that's why I'm very, very grateful for many of my colleagues here at the college.
Thank you, guys. So we're going to open up now for questions from the audience. Does anyone have a question they would like to ask one or all of our panelists?
So a lot of great successes along the way. Thinking about the book, and she spent a lot of time talking about the industry and things that with herself, I think we talked, somebody was mentioning up there, that she had to have the confidence and stuff, and then some mentors along the way, but also some companies that were willing to adjust for her schedule. But then I hear more, I think I hear a lot of family support as well. So maybe kind of talk about balancing that, like our expectation of family versus what a job might have to, how the support can be there and yet different, I guess, between the two, and where does it fall more on, for a woman to let go of things or rise to success, sorry.
No, you're fine. So I'm going to see if I can clarify your question. Is your question about how to balance work and home life, or?
The career, maybe flexibility, or support, maybe at home, I guess would be the
I gotcha.
support for the successes they've had.
Okay. Does somebody want to start? Do we all want to answer? Go down the line.
Or was it equal?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. There we go. Anybody want to take that? Right. I'm just gonna put it there. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think that with my teaching career, there really is no flexibility. You know, this is your job. You're expected to be here from this time to this time. And when it comes to my business, I do believe that I am kind of in control of that schedule, but then at the same time, it is a huge time commitment. So I think that, you know, my family has been very supportive. My mom actually retired from her career and moved to Nashville to help run the store while I still teach. So definitely there's support there. And for my husband, he's a huge support as well. And many times, you know, we may have something planned that we were going to go do, and then something comes up and I have to stay later at the store. And he is just very understanding. At first, you know, he might have questioned, are you going to be there all the time? But I think that they just find that, you know, if this is your passion, and the people that are there to support you, if they know you have a passion, then they're going to be there to truly support your passion and help you with those commitments.
Well, I would definitely say being a mom of a 2-month-old, a 1-year-old, and a 2-year-old, definitely needing support because, you know, a lot of times with healthcare, it's not a 9 to 5. It's not a set schedule. You go when you're needed, and a lot of times there's no days off because healthcare doesn't take a day off. So I found myself kind of feeling, for lack of a better word, a lot of mom guilt sometimes because I can't be the stay-at-home mom, or, you know, and I recently started all 3 of them in daycare, and that was hardest thing I've ever done in my life, because I kind of had to let go of that expectation that I'm always going to be around, and because my mom was always around for me, and I wanted to give that same thing to them, but I had to let go of that in order to pursue the passion that I had, because I think a lot of times as a mom and as a career woman, you kind of think that you have to give up parts of your career so that you can be a mom and pour so much into them that you forget to pour into yourself. So I'm learning to pour into myself and pursue my dreams, and that my dreams don't have to stop because of them. And that's been hard. It's been really hard to learn that. But, you know, like she was saying, support comes a long way. My mom and dad have been awesome at picking them up when neither of us can get to daycare, or my husband, he's good about, well, if I can't get to him, then he can, and, you know, I might not get off at the stated time that I was supposed to get off, so he'll cook dinner for me and I won't have to worry about it. So it definitely, like, you have to have a good support system.
Yes, and yes. You know, and so I have benefited from both. I do have, this job is flexible, and so that has helped itself tremendously. Now, the flip of that is that I take a tremendous amount of work home, and then that creates its own different work-life balance. Then you have no balance, just because then the laptop is up and the email's up, and so it's 10 o'clock at night, and well, a student emailed, I might as well respond to them. But that flexibility has been wonderful, but the support is invaluable as well. I mean, my husband, when I was very supportive of me going back to graduate school. I don't think either one of us realized all the ramifications of that, but he flexed his job so that he could. I only had to go to school 1 night a week. It was partially online, partially face-to-face, and so he changed his job schedule to where he was able to get off. He works out of town, so it was harder for him to pick up the baby from daycare and all. He changed to be home with him one afternoon, and he has continued that, and so he always picks the kids up. I've always said that people, I know there was a rumor at the daycare, there's bound to have been one, that we were really divorced and we just pretended we weren't, because he always picked them up on Wednesdays, you know, and a lot of times people have visitation, it's, you know, on Wednesdays, but otherwise I always dropped him off and picked him up, so I'm confident they were like, why do these people pretend they're still married? Because clearly the dad is only there on Wednesdays. But that was invaluable, and he still does that. But we have had every grandparent has taken care of my kids sick. And by that, I mean my dad alone, my father-in-law alone. I mean, there have been times when the kid was sick My husband just really needed to be at work. I've got class. I need to come teach. He would call his parents. His parents live closer, so they are often faster to get here than mine. Yeah, mom's got such and such, and bless his heart, his dad has sat there. My dad has come 3 hours to sit there with the sick kid. So that family support has been tremendous. But I've been very grateful to have a job here that was not always. Sometimes it's 12 hours, but sometimes there's work that can be taken home. And the one message I would say to that, one day when you all are supervisors, think that through. Is there a reason for somebody to sit here to do the same job they could do somewhere else? And so I'm grateful for supervisors who would say, you don't have to be at your desk if that same work can be done somewhere else. And I don't know that enough of our workplaces think that through, but that's something, when you're in a position to make that change for somebody, make that change for somebody.
Yeah, so I guess ditto. So the hardest thing, there is flexibility in our positions here, which means you blur the lines of when does work stop and home life start, and being a good mom and a happy person there and not a frazzled person at work. So that's probably the biggest challenge for the flexibility, but I've always enjoyed the flexibility. But so I'm going to say something slightly different. So yes, there's been some work support and there's been home support, but I'm going to share with you, there's been home challenge. Right? There's been not that, oh, just challenge. How committed am I? How valuable is this? And that I do that. I've just felt that sometimes, that this is something that I really want and we can make it work. Boy, and then I'll be like, oh, I don't know why I did that. I don't want to do it. Oh, yes, you will. I'm like, oh, shoot, quit making me work. So I've got that. I'm challenged to stay on task. I'm challenged to have that task have meaning. And so I actually do I very much appreciate that.
Thank you, ladies. Other questions from the audience?
So I've recently changed my major to what is kind of like my heart's desire, which is computer machining and welding. And you all stated that family was a big support, but my mom necessarily wasn't in support of that. She thought it wasn't ladylike, thought I should pursue nursing, which was my original plan, but it wasn't for me. But I was wondering, do you have any advice for me keeping my confidence level up and not letting myself get down because of her disagreeing with my choice of career?
Okay. I can quickly speak to that, not to say that everybody else can't. Pursue your passion and trust that your mom will come around. I started college as a biochemistry major, which my mother was very proud of because I was going to discover a cure for cancer. And about a year later, I changed that major to sociology with a concentration in criminal justice. My mother was not impressed with that either. And she believed I was just giving up, that I could do, you're just... And I made A's in my chemistry classes, and I don't say that to be arrogant, but to say it wasn't that I couldn't do it, it was that I didn't want to. I didn't want to do this. She came around. I mean, years later, she said, she was like in a work conference or something, and they were talking about finding something that you're passionate about and finding a way to do it as a career. And she was like, and that was you. I mean, for whatever reason, like as a kid, I would read these crime novels and all kinds of strange stuff, that you think, wow, why is that kid reading that? That kind of thing, was my interest. And she came around years later. And then eventually I do have a doctorate. I'm not discovering a cure for cancer. Someone else can do that. But it's more important for you to be happy in somewhere that you want to be than to be forced into a role that you don't. My college roommate spent 8 years getting a veterinary degree, and she had decided 1 year after she really wanted to be a vet tech. She didn't really want to be a vet, but the family all believed she was going to be a vet, and so that I just can't let the family down. She worked for 1.5 years and then just was like, no, I can't do this anymore. So it's much better to make the decision and do what's right for yourself than to follow somebody else's dream.
I just say that at the end of the day, whatever degree or certification or anything that you get from this university will have your name on it, not your mom's. So it needs to be your passion. It needs to be what you want to do, because your mom can't do that for you. And like she said, you risk, making your mom happy, but not yourself. And, who wants to live a life that they're not happy with? So
When I was getting ready to open my store, there were lots of challenges along the way, finding the right spot. And as I was talking to my mom, because we are close, I said, you know, I'm really excited about this. And she said, you know, I'm glad you found your passion, but do you really want to start a store? You know, you already teach, you already do this, and the list went on. And, you know, so she didn't necessarily push me to do that. But now it's kind of funny because I actually employ her to work at the store. So you just got to follow your dreams, and she will come around, and she will be happy for you.
Any other questions? I think we have time to take one more question. Here's your chance. Go ahead, Miss Buddy.
I think this one's going to go straight to Garret because I am so curious. I can imagine myself in your position. Like, you have this thing that starts off as a hobby. It takes wings. You're ready to make a big change with it. And you also have this other job. Like, you have 2 jobs. Your hobby became your job. And so sometimes in my personal life, I feel like I give myself grace with my children. I have 82 children. I don't even know anymore. There are just so many of them. And I feel like I give myself grace to be a bad mom some days, and I'm doing a good job at forgiving myself there. And in the classroom, I feel confident with who I am as a teacher, even though I still have bad days there. But one time my husband looked at me. He's a duck hunter, and if you know anything about duck hunting, that's a job. And he said, and I said something like, man, your hobby looks like a full-time job. It takes a full-time amount of work to do this. And he invests so much time and energy. And he looked at me and he meant nothing by it. He said, you don't have any hobbies. And I was like, oh, it stings a little bit. Like, I really don't, because I feel like in order to achieve that work-life balance, I have to forfeit the hobby ground. And so I've since started entertaining ideas about what I would like to do as a hobby, what would be rewarding for me. But I wanted to ask you, having said all of that, the moment when you realize, like, do you remember the moment when you're like, I'm going to open up a store? And if it was a moment, or was it a time period? Because I just want to know, I want you to explain what that feels like when you say, okay, I'm going to get criticism, I'm going to get some raised eyebrows, but I'm going to ignore that because I am going to open up a store. So that's my question. What was that moment like?
Well, honestly, you know, like I said before, I've always had a dream to be a teacher. And later on in life, I loved to shop. I love clothes. And I always, in the back of my head, thought it would be so cool to own a women's boutique. So I kind of always had that back there. And I actually, you know, I went to craft fairs and I did all these little things to build up to that moment. And I actually was doing a little show, and I had somebody present me with the opportunity of coming into their store. And it was like that moment where I was just full of fire, ready to go, and I knew, okay, this is my opportunity. And like I said before, I have to pray about everything, so I can't jump into it. And I knew right then that all of those little moments led me to that. So I didn't really know, okay, I'm going to open a store. It was just like all of those little things led to that moment. And I think whatever your desire is, you just have to go for it. You can never put it down. I have a cousin that's recently started painting, and she has a full-time job, but she's now painting, and now she's been presented with the opportunity of selling her artwork. So I think, you know, it's just all those little moments are going to lead you to the right place in life. And I was thinking back to my teaching job. I interviewed for several teaching jobs before I got the one that I'm in now. And I just thought the other day when I was jotting down these notes how it was so awesome to think, you know, all of those no's led me to Nashville. And now I'm here, and this is, you know, part of my life story. And I think it's just awesome. So whatever your hobby is, pursue it and find something that you really love. It doesn't matter what other people think, and people can say, oh, you'll never make it. But it's whatever you love. And you don't have to go big with it, but, you know, just do what your heart desires.
Any final words from any of our other panelists?
You have a hobby, you Miss Paula Body, and you know it is those students and their success and living vicariously through them. So if you need another hobby, you can always find one. But I guess I'm just saying to anyone, that as you follow your passion, it's great when you get paid for it too. So I was fortunate, I guess I'm just thinking of that because I have a theater background and I love drama. And now I had this opportunity to direct plays, and we do a couple shows every year, and that became part of my job. And then, you know, plus I get to do all this, you know, job stuff that I also do. So somehow, I guess I'm saying, as opposed to doing something separate, and that is just courage beyond courage to open up your own, put out a shingle and open up your own business. But can you feed those other parts of your soul even at work? And I guess so. I'll find you a hobby.
You know, the one last thing I think I would say, look for ways, especially if you are in a position of leadership now or when you are in the future, is look for ways you can speak encouragement to younger employees, whether that's male or female employees. I could tell you stories, the details are not significant, but where, especially when I was a young mother, you know, a couple of comments by men in senior leadership positions were made that were very hurtful to me, and quite frankly then discouraged me from advocating for myself, discouraged me because, well, if that's the attitude that person has, then maybe I shouldn't ask for something more. So be careful of the words you say to people, but look for ways to be flexible and encourage people where you can. I'll always be grateful to someone who was willing to invest that in me. So look for ways you can do that with somebody else.
All right, thank you, ladies. If we can give them one more round of applause.
I wanted to give a big round of applause to all of you for attending, and you also virtually. If Lean In is something that you have read, stay tuned. We will have more events next semester. And if you have not read the book, please do, because we will have more events next semester. If you have any additional lingering questions, you're welcome to come up and speak to the panelists. Otherwise, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thanks for coming.